This is Here's How, Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast, presented by William Campbell.
Thank you for downloading episode 78 of Here's How for the 30th of August 2018. We're just coming out of a long hot summer. Ireland had its first real taste of drought and there could well be more coming, so I'm asking Right to Water if we should be giving water away for free.
Here's How is Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast. Make your view heard. Just dial 076 603 5060 and tell the world what you're thinking. Your voicemail may be included in the next podcast. You can find tips on recording your contribution and other ways to contact the show at here'show.ie/call.
In a few minutes we'll have this. So when you say it's progressive, it's not.
Hold on a minute now, William. Just
But just on that specific point, deal with that specific point. It's not progressive. It's subsidising the rich.
No, it isn't. You're making all sorts of extrapolations.
That's coming up shortly, but first, two things. I'm trying to produce the podcast to a high standard and have a higher standard of debate than overhearing the dinner party discussion of a millionaire and her college friends on a weekend morning. That takes time and effort to chase down guests and do research so that I can actually ask occasionally intelligent questions. To justify that time, I'm asking people for donations via the Patreon website. Basically, that allows you to make a totally voluntary donation for each podcast. I'd like to thank all the people who have already done that. And if you can do the same, follow the links at www.here'show.ie. And secondly, in the last podcast, I had an interview with presidential candidate Gemma O'Doherty, and I have to say that I found the reactions to it pretty depressing. There was a Twitter storm in a teacup with a series of journalists making what I thought were incredibly petty complaints. In particular, they complained of Gemma doing an undercover story several years ago that exposed some crisis pregnancy agencies advising their clients on how to obtain and smuggle into the Republic abortion pills, which were illegal at the time. Now, whatever you think of abortion, it's pretty remarkable that a crisis pregnancy agency would advise someone to break the law, and reporting on that is absolutely a journalistic thing to do. Kitty Holland of the Irish Times in particular laid at Gemma O'Doherty's door a tasteless joke on Twitter shared by someone who apparently supports Gemma. Now, I can see that if Gemma O'Doherty had shared a tasteless joke, then she might be justifiably criticised, but criticising Gemma O'Doherty for a bad joke from a supporter of hers, that's just nonsense, and it exposes an agenda on the part of Kitty Holland. If Kitty Holland is so short of stories to report about, she might do better covering something like the Garda Commissioner being called as a witness in a case that centred on him personally benefiting from Garda corruption. That was a story that made international headlines, but not a single word of it was printed in the Irish Times. All that said, I don't think that Gemma O'Doherty, or anyone else, is above criticism. I had a long discussion with Gemma after the recording, and she was not happy that I had asked her about instances of fake news that she had shared, including sharing stories fabricated by the Internet Research Agency, an arm of Russian military intelligence, the same bunch that were stoking dissent through Facebook during the 2016 election in the United States, and ever since. At the time that I recorded the interview, I hadn't seen some of the other things that Gemma had promoted online, and I want to look at two in particular. The first is a graphic that she shared widely in the context of a story about a chemical that is claimed to be a carcinogen that causes cancer. The image put Ireland among the countries with the highest cancer rates in the world, along with other rich Western countries, and lists countries like Niger, Gambia, Bhutan and Yemen as countries with the lowest cancer rates. The intent is clearly to promote the idea that the industrialized West is bad for your health. And this is absolute nonsense. Cancer is a disease of old age. The reason that Ireland, Denmark, Australia and Norway have among the highest cancer rates in the world is because we have the highest life expectancies in the world. People in Niger, Gambia, Bhutan and Yemen don't get cancer because they're dead of other causes before they're old enough to die of cancer. And to think otherwise is daft, tinfoil hat, conspiratorial nonsense. Also, on other media, Gemma has defended her coverage and sharing of stories on the HPV vaccine Gardasil. She said that she's just asking questions, but that's not true. It's clear from the direction of her apologia that she supports some anti-vaxxers, and at least sometimes she reports outrageous and false anti-vaxxer claims as fact. That's not just asking questions. Given the constitutional restrictions on the office, we have a lot of presidential wannabes, who are talking about how they would use the office in creative ways. That's not a bad thing. Mary Robinson was slapped down for making a similar claim, and she proved the critics wrong. But if you're going to do that, remember that judgment is key. It's true, who the president is photographed with and who they host at the Áras, that has an impact. And Gemma O'Doherty and other candidates have put that on the agenda. Now that it's out there, nobody can complain that the judgment of the candidate in who or what they might endorse is central to the election of a president. And that means that a candidate's record of good or bad judgment in the past is fair game to discuss.
Do you agree? Do you disagree? If you want your point of view heard, dial 076 603 5060 and leave a contribution for the show. The lines are open 24/7 and you can find tips on how to record a good contribution and other ways to contact the podcast at here'show.ie/call.
On the line now, I have Brendan Ogle. He was the founder of the Irish Locomotive Drivers Association. He was a train driver for many years. He was also the secretary of the ESB Group of Unions from 2010 to 2014. And he's now the senior officer for Unite the Union in the Republic of Ireland. But he's talking to me today mostly about being a coordinator for the Right to Water group that opposes water metering and water charges. Brendan, we've had a long, hot summer and we've had hose pipe bans, and we're looking at those continuing. Water is not something that's just free and falls out of the sky from the point of view of being used, is it?
Absolutely not. Water is, along with air, I suppose, the essential sources of life, and is absolutely crucial to our individual survival and indeed the survival of the planet. Insofar as it falls out of the sky, it's very necessary that it does so. But absolutely, this is a huge environmental issue. And I'm pleased to say one of the few environmental issues or any other issues that we've got right in Ireland. So, you're absolutely right to point out the seriousness. Well, being essential for life, I suppose the tenet of the Right to Water campaign is that water is a human right. That was confirmed as a principle by the United Nations in 2010. And if it's a human right, then it needs to be vindicated. And we believe that the best way to vindicate the human right for clean water and sanitation is to pay for it and to invest in it. I mean, of course it has to be paid for. Of course it does. Through progressive general taxation. That's the way, I suppose, to be honest, which we happened upon in Ireland in the way that we happened upon so many things, like schools run by churches and things. But we happened upon water being paid for through progressive general taxation. And it turns out many years later that means Ireland has and is guaranteed zero water poverty. Because whether you need water to feed yourself, to wash yourself...
Well, hold on for a second. Are you sure that's true? I seem to remember Luke McFlanagan presenting a bottle of rather murky brown liquid to the then Taoiseach. People who are getting that out of their taps, they don't have zero water poverty, do they?
Well, in terms of the availability of water, and I lived in Roscommon, you pointed out in the introduction that I was a train driver. It's interesting to think of this. And when I was a train driver, I lived in County Roscommon. where Ming is from.
Yeah.
And didn't know him at the time, but I remember the attempt to introduce water charges in the 1990s. And I didn't pay for it, for the very reason that Ming pointed out, because at that stage, a lot of the water in the bath, if you filled the bath where I lived, it was this kind of brown, murky thing. And Roscommon County Council, as they were wont to do, sent out some very polite gentlemen to seek a check of me for the water charges. I told them to wait a second at the door. And then I filled up a glass of water and I brought it back to the door and I told him if he drank it, I'd sign the check.
Ming might have been inspired when he went into the Dáil, and I understand where you're going there. But, Brendan, isn't there a fundamental problem here that cost disciplines usage? And we have enormous variations in the amount of water usage in Ireland. I'll get to that in a minute. But it's clear that some people are using way more water than they need to. Shouldn't they pay for that?
Where is it clear?
Well, I'll tell you exactly, and I mentioned this and I repeated an error that was made in the Irish Times in podcast number 75 and gave a figure per person, which is in fact per household. But in Dublin 4 and Dublin 6, people use about 80% more water than people in Dublin 20. Why should they not have to pay for that?
Well, we'd have to figure out why they use 80% more water. We have had, and I really appreciate...
Let me slow you down there. Why do we have to figure that out? Who's interested in that?
Well, if you'd let me explain...
You made a statement, and I don't think it's true. I'm sure they use a lot more virgin olive oil as well. We don't have a commission investigating that. We just tell them you have to pay for it.
You're looking at the water consumption figures.
Yeah.
And you're extrapolating from that citizens in a particular area... Mm-hmm. Make a conscious choice to use more water than citizens anywhere else.
No, I didn't say that it was conscious.
Okay, well, make a choice then.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's think about that for a moment. And as I was about to say, I welcome the fact of having this discussion with you because facts get lost in a very short period of history. Mm-hmm. We've had this debate for a number of years now in Ireland, and it hasn't happened in a vacuum. In fact, the government were so compelled by the strength of the water movement, of which Right to Water is one but not the only part, that they took the exceptional step of establishing an independent water commission. Bit of a row over who should be the chair with that, but anyway, it ended up being a truly independent water commission. And what it found was that Irish average usage when leaks are excluded is 111 litres per person. Mm-hmm. Irish average usage when leaks are included is 123 litres per person. Mm-hmm. And that the average UK usage, for example, is 140 litres per person. And what it found also is that half of our potable water, I'm using half loosely because it varies from area to area, but it's still a stunning figure, half of our potable water is lost in leaks. Now, those leaks aren't uniform.
Yes. Brendan, can I just interject a little bit? Because I want to say that, I've been looking at Right to Water for some time. And I think some of the things that you say are correct. One is that the water supply, that's to say the ownership of the water in the rivers, in the water tables and so forth, should absolutely not be privatised. We've had experience of that in the UK. It's clearly extremely problematic. It's caused great problems in the UK. I think that's obvious. I also... I think everybody has seen the catastrophe that is the management of Irish water, and that's been set up as a very, I think, incompetently and so forth. And I don't think either of us would agree on that. But the principle that water should be given away for free and its cost put onto to general taxation with no regard to whether people use it wisely, parsimoniously, or whether people are filling their swimming pools with it. I think that's just obviously wrong. You say the water is a human right. Water is no more or less necessary than food. Should people get food for free?
Well, first, you've used the word free now. Several
free
times.
At the point of use. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah, well, okay, yeah, I'm glad you clarified that, because that's not free.
No, they have to pay for it. Whether you use it sparingly or not, you have to pay.
And to be fair, William, you are in my view, correctly, ascertaining where the debate is. So just let me deal with the debate from our point of view. I pay my taxes, always have done, through the PAYE system. And when I look at my payslip, I find that the biggest single outgoing is tax. That's not free. That's a huge outgoing. And I expect.
Brendan, let's leave the language games behind. Everybody listening, we have an intelligent audience. Everybody listening understands that free in this context means free at the point of use. Nobody is imagining that there's no payment made.
Okay. So, given that I've made the statement that domestic general taxation is the most effective way to pay for our water, the most equitable way and the fairest way. I have yet to see any evidence. In fact, the evidence would appear to be to the contrary, that installing meters and privatising the water system, or just installing, forget about the privatisation for a moment, just installing the meters and applying charges based on metering, leads to any reduction in consumption. Now, where is the evidence for me saying there's no evidence of that? Well, the evidence is this. Just across the stretch of little water there that separates us from the UK, water has been privatised since the late 1980s. They use 20% more water than us.
Pre or post leaks?
But pre-leaks, they use 20% more water than us. Per person, per capita, they use 20% more water than us.
I think that's after leaks. Right
to Water were saying that for a number of years. The Independent Water Commission found that to be the case. So they've had meters there. I lived there for some years myself. They've had meters there. And they've got the same water issues as ours, except they're worse in terms of the lack of investment going into the water system, Brendan, in terms of the amount of money being spent.
One thing that I remember growing up is how poverty-stricken the ambitions of our politicians were, that the greatest thing they could say would be Ireland's performance in a particular area is only a bit worse than in the UK. I don't think that's a good comparator, particularly these days. What I'm saying is that Ireland should do the right thing.
Yes.
And whether we then improve or are behind what the UK does is not a very good comparator. In Dublin, within a few kilometres of each other, you have a working class area, Dublin 20, where people use about 270 litres of water per household per day. And a few kilometres away, you have Dublin 4 and Dublin 6, where people are using 80% more, almost double. It doesn't take a genius to work out, and because it tracks very, very closely, that water usage goes up with wealth. Now, you can argue why that might be, but it's certainly true. And I don't understand why working class people in Dublin 20 should subsidise better off people in Dublin 6 and Dublin 4 who use nearly twice as much water as them.
That's simply not the case. You cannot extrapolate from the figures that you've produced, which you just extrapolated, that rich people use and are somehow being subsidised by poor people in relation to water.
I'm not extrapolating. That's what the figures say.
No, well, the figures don't say that, because the figures don't go into the reasons for that in terms of the state of the water infrastructure area to area. For example...
No, but this is measured... No, hold on for a second. This is measured, so this is past the infrastructure. This is the measured usage. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, but the old Victorian water infrastructure is metered. It's just as much.
This is from household
You've raised Dublin 20. Dublin 20 didn't exist 30 years ago. It didn't exist. It wasn't there.
So?
So you can assume, therefore, and I'm only dealing with this as you've put it to me, you can assume, therefore, that the water infrastructure in Dublin 20 is a newer infrastructure in terms of the pipes, in terms of the access to reservoirs, in terms of...
No, Brendan, you've got the facts. No, Brendan, I just want to correct you on a fact. This is metered, household metered usage. So this only takes into account the water that actually arrives into the person's household. I take your point that it may well be the case that you've got newer infrastructure in Dublin 20, and that would mean you would have much lower leaks. But this is past the leaks in the street.
Well, you would have to then look into how many people are living in the house. The Irish Water, or the Independent Water Commission report gives us the figures per person.
Yeah, no, but those are average figures. across the whole of the country.
They are average figures.
Yeah, and averages belie extremes, because if I
believe,
hold on for
Brendan,
hold on for a second.
People who use most water are the people who are at home the most. Would you accept that?
Not necessarily, no.
Okay. Well, I believe...
Brendan, can I just give you a straight comparator?
Right.
If I go to the supermarket and I buy a whole load of food that I don't need, I cook something and I leave it in the fridge for a week and it goes rotten, I throw it out and so forth. If I waste a lot of food, I will pay for that food. If I have exactly the same house as my next door neighbour, same number of people in the house, and everybody in my house is careful to take a short shower when there's a drought like this summer, is careful to turn off the tap when they're brushing their teeth, is careful to make sure that they don't run the dishwasher unless everything is full, and my next door neighbour does none of that, I am cross-subsidising them because water is not paid per usage. And that's wrong.
But hold on a minute. Cross-subsidisation, as you put it, happens in every aspect of our economy, of our society.
Not to that degree.
No, William, you're interviewing me. Will you let me speak, please?
Go right ahead.
Thank you. Cross-subsidisation happens in every... We have to run society at societal level.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there is no evidence anywhere that the privatisation or the commodification of a basic human right such as water is somehow used to advance the cause of those who are living in poverty or on low income levels, or disabled, spend a lot of time at home for a variety of reasons. In fact, the evidence throughout the world is the contrary. The evidence throughout the world is where privateers, the financial sector, corporate interests get hold of the human right to water. A, profits go through the roof. B, the service and investment drops. And C, most importantly, the people who suffer the most are the poorest people on the planet.
Can I make an observation on that? I tend to agree with a lot of what you're saying, but you've got a false linkage. You're saying that you're listing problems with privatising the water system, which I tend to agree with. But that's entirely separate and distinct from asking to people to, and you're confusing two completely separate, two separate concepts. Asking people to pay per volume has nothing got to do with privatisation.
I am not confusing two concepts, but let me deal specifically with that point.
Okay.
Because I do not accept. Right to Water do not accept. The unions involved, the politicians and the community campaigners do not accept that the water discussion and debate in this country can be divorced from the privatisation agenda. We do not accept that, and we will only accept that in one circumstance, and one circumstance only. And that is if the public ownership and management of our water and sanitation system is put to the people in a referendum for insertion as a function of government in our constitution. In other words, if the privatisation profit motive of water, which is what's driving meters and what's driving costs and charges across the continent and across the planet, if the privatisation aspect is removed, then and only then can we have a proper discussion in relation to the matter you raise. Now, to
clarify, Brendan, you're saying that if there was this guarantee against privatisation, you wouldn't have an issue per se with metering.
Oh, I'll come back to that in a minute.
Okay.
What I am saying is, in order to pursue that issue, Right to Water, and Right to Water are the only group to do it, by the way. The Greens didn't do it. None of the political parties did it. None of the people
what is it?
We pulled together a draft constitutional amendment, which Joan Collins has been pursuing through the Dáil, and is now at the second committee stage to put to the people. The one thing that the expert commission that the government were forced to appoint and make truly independent found from all the submissions it received, all of them, was that every single submission identified the fear of privatisation as the ultimate issue driving this debate in Ireland and the one issue that everybody felt needed to be addressed. Yet those who say it's not about privatisation in Fine Gael, in business, in the media, the metering companies themselves, Irish Water itself, all those who say it's not about privatisation have refused to get behind that simple initiative. Now,
okay, we take that point, Brendan. We can take that point on board.
It is absolutely about privatisation. And I am not, William, with you or with anybody else, getting into a discussion about what will happen until we do that. Right to Water has a clear objective, and we've published it many, many times. You said you've looked at our website, so you know all about it.
I have.
We have a clear objective to see the ownership and management of water enshrined in perpetuity in our constitution. We've brought together the amendment ourselves. We've tried it. We've come in public ownership. Yeah, public ownership and management.
Oh, okay, that's fair enough. Pete, no, you are perhaps speaking a little bit like you're at a union meeting. I'm trying to keep things concise here, but I want to make sure that you get to make your point. But okay. what I want to do is here, I want to read a quotation from your website, which I have looked at very carefully. And it says, water charges will discriminate against working people and the unemployed in favour of the wealthy and are another regressive tax taking vital money out of the pockets of people and out of our economy. Our public water system is already paid for through general taxation, which is progressive, and we wish it to remain that way. So there's a couple of problems with this. First of all, which I think you've agreed to earlier in the interview, nothing is really free. It's just the method by which you're paying it. Mm-hmm. So the idea that money can come out of nowhere to pay for the water system if it's not paid for through metering and through charging doesn't exist. People are paying one way or the other. They're not getting a free ride no matter what happens. But you also say here, our public water system is paid for through general taxation, which is progressive. And for the listeners who aren't familiar with that, progressive taxation generally means the richer pay more. If you're not so rich, you pay less. That's actually not just untrue, it is specifically the reverse of the truth, because as we've seen, there is a direct link between the wealth of the area and how much water they use, so they're getting it cheaper than anybody else. They pay effectively a flat rate, everybody's paying the same, but wealthier areas are using 80% more water. And by the way, those wealthy areas are not very granular. Dublin 6, Dublin 20, they're enormous areas. Tens of probably hundreds of thousands of people live in both. And within those, there is a huge variation. But within that huge variation, for example, the average in Dublin 6 is 80% higher. But within that, there's going to be half of the people are above that again. So when you say it's progressive, it's not.
Hold on a minute now, William. Just
But just on that specific point, deal with that specific point. It's not progressive. It's subsidising the rich.
No, it isn't. You're making all sorts of extrapolations. First of all, taxation is not people aren't taxed on an area level. People are taxed on an individual level. Mm-hmm. I don't pay my taxes based on where I live. Mm-hmm. I pay my taxes based on what I earn. I'm happy to do so, by the way.
Well, yeah, not just on what you earn. VAT has nothing to do with what you earn.
You've just said about the taxation coming, that this area is taxed less than this area.
No, I did not. I said the payment of that, and you said that the paying for water through general taxation is progressive. It's not.
Yes, it is progressive, and I'll tell you why it's progressive. First of all, we pay. There's three types of taxes. There's income tax, there's consumption taxes, and there's taxes on corporations or profits or wealth or whatever way you want to define those.
But for personal taxes, VAT, everybody pays the same.
VAT is a consumption tax. So income taxes are progressive. Would you agree with that?
Generally in Ireland, highly so, yeah. VAT is absolutely not.
Income taxes are progressive. So in terms of paying, if you live in Ireland, not to the extent that I would like, by the way, but the more you earn, the more you would pay in tax, assuming you don't find one of those ways of avoiding paying tax at all, which the very rich can do. But generally speaking, that's the case. So when you pay for your water through that method, And if you earn less, or if you happen to be unfortunate to be unemployed, or be underemployed, or be disabled,
I understand
or be on
what you're saying. That income tax is progressive,
and the rich people,
Brendan, I'm going to insist that we truncate this. You're correct. Income tax is progressive, and the payment of income tax is progressive. So if water was being paid for only out of income tax, that on the payment side, not on the consumption side, on the payment side would be progressive. But people also pay VAT, which has zero progressive element in it. And in addition, people effectively pay business taxes. If you go into a shop and you buy something, you effectively have to pay the business tax that business is paying, that the tax, the burden of that tax ultimately falls on the consumer. Nobody's in business for charity. They have to pay the taxes levied on that business they are levied on the consumer, and it doesn't matter how much you earn. If you go into the shop, you have to buy that thing. Hold on for a second.
We are not opposed to water charges. We're opposed to domestic water charges. You do know that, don't you?
Yes, I'm aware of that. You want businesses to pay water taxes, but not
for the reasons you point out.
The bottom line is, if electricity was free, some people would leave the lights on all night.
Well, people say that, William. Okay,
yeah.
And I looked at a situation there. I have a quote here in front of me, actually, from the leader of the Green Party in Ireland, Eamon Ryan. Mm-hmm. Talking there during the storm. The storms at the start of the year, about people leaving their taps running all night. So people leave their lights on because it's free, and people leave the taps on because it's free. And
no, people don't leave the lights on because it's not free.
The problem with that is, I get the distinction. The problem with that is, when the government were forced to appoint an expert water commission, it found that there was no waste among domestic consumers that they could extract from the massive leakage problem. Now, am I saying, William, that there isn't a person out there or some people out there who are irresponsible? Mm-hmm. First of all, no, I'm not saying that. And second of all, no, I disapprove of water wastage. I think I consume as little water as I can get away with myself. I'm aware of the drought we've had in the summer. I don't leave taps on. I turn the tap off when I'm brushing my teeth. I've got a water butt in my toilet. If I lived in anything other than an apartment, I'd probably be trying to harvest my water.
Sure, yeah, but Brendan, many people don't do that. Why should you? Right. Why should they get a free ride?
Because society functions at a macro level in that respect. And I don't believe that there is any major waste. I believe we basically have a culture.
I'm not. Waste is not the issue. Brendan, I'm trying to keep on the issue. Waste is not the issue. You listed a number of ways. Brendan, you listed a number of ways which are very laudable of how you save water, and that's you're obviously a conscientious person. But this summer, at the height of the drought, when Lidl was selling plastic swimming pools, there were queues outside Lidl before it opened, and they were sold out before the Lidl employees could get the tills. That one swimming pool, come on, hold on a second. That one swimming pool takes more water to fill than a family in Dublin 20 uses in 1 month. I'm not saying that that's wasteful, but I'm saying that if people want to do that, they should pay for it.
Okay. And I'm saying it is wasteful. So I go further than you. Okay? I'm saying it is wasteful. I'm saying in a drought situation, people go down to Lidl buying plastic swimming pools. Mm-hmm. It's a disgrace. That's what I'm saying. And I'm also saying that people and businesses making money charging anywhere between 8 and 16 euro for car washes in that scenario is a further disgrace. And I see no efforts or no criticisms of the globalized petrol stations we have around this country now, that used to be owned by you-know-who, running their car washes ad infinitum throughout the summer for profit. I see no attacks on them on RTE News. I see no statements from politicians. I see no Fine Gael Environment or Green Party spokesmen coming out. I think it's all wrong. I think And to address the swimming pool issue, the plastic swimming pool issues.
It doesn't matter whether it's plastic or built in.
Well, I think it does, because I make a point on the other swimming pools in a minute, right?
Hang on a second. If you live in Killiney with a plush house with a swimming pool, you should be allowed to get away with it. But if you just buy one in Lidl, you shouldn't be allowed to use it.
William, I want to deal with your issue. To address the limited amount of waste and irresponsible behaviour that does take place, and takes place in every country.
Yeah.
And the expert commission found it takes place less here than anywhere they could find, but it still does take place. To address that, we have a choice. Mm-hmm. The choice is this. We can spend up to €1 billion on water meters, on the infrastructure to put in water meters, on a billing system, on call centres, on consultants. But even leaving them aside, you could have done without them. Just the billing system alone, we can spend hundreds of millions investing all of that to do what? To get a small number of irresponsible people not to fill up plastic swimming pools. What business would do that?
Can I answer that? I want to specifically answer that, because we've talked about the behavioural effects of charging people, for example, for electricity and not for water. And that's on the consumer side. But there's a second side to this. And the second side to this, Brendan, is on the supplier side. And when you pay for something, there is an entirely different relationship between you and the supplier than when you're not paying for it, or where the payment is essentially invisible, where it's being levied on taxation or whatever.
Free at the point of use.
Free at the point of use, exactly, yes. Essentially, what I think you're disregarding is consumer power. And you actually brought it up yourself, that when somebody came along and looked for you to pay a water bill, you could show them the water and say, that's dirty water, if you drink it, I'll pay the bill. The point is, and you made the point yourself, we're losing half of our drinkable water through leaks. The ESB doesn't lose half of its electricity. And the reason is because that's a monetizable resource for the ESB.
That's not the reason.
They're losing money. If that electricity doesn't get as far as their consumer, they lose money. For Irish Water, it doesn't matter a damn whether and for years when it was run by the local authorities, they didn't care a damn whether the water got to you or not, because whoever was there ticked the box, said, yeah, I've done my job for the day, now I can go home, doesn't matter. If there are two effects that you're missing, that you're discounting in terms of billing, and the first one is the financial discipline on the supplier. And that's to say, they will then be disciplined and forced by market forces to prioritise fixing the leaks. And number two, it would give power to the consumer to say, if I don't get my product, I'm not paying for it. When it's on general taxation, you can't not pay for it when you don't get it.
Right. Let me deal. Take me about 3 minutes to deal with all that.
Go right ahead.
Right. Thank you. Who uses our water? Right? 23% of our water is used domestically, and industry uses 77%. So we're having a debate here about domestic water charges.
Yes.
Now, Irish Water itself believes that if every home in the country is metered, and we all fall in with the Irish Water Plan as it was, that they can save 6%. 6% of the water that is used domestically.
Yes.
6%. So 6% of 23% is 1.38%.
But you're disregarding the 50% of the whole that's being lost in leaks.
I'll come. No, hold on a minute. I'll talk to leaks about you all day, or I'll talk about domestic people wasting water or not all day. But let me deal. You've raised the issue of people's behaviour. So Irish Water is saying
no. I know we've dealt with that. I want to deal with the financial discipline on the company.
I'm going to come to that. But first of all, it has to be seen in the context of what Irish Water are trying to achieve. All the financial discipline in the world is trying, by Irish Water's plan, to save 6% of domestic water use, which is 1.38% of the total. And so it's not incorrect.
It is.
And so far they've cost $1 billion to get there, and they failed.
Okay.
Now, so in terms then
what you're
of the
referring to there
incentivization,
is disciplining the consumer.
In terms of the incentivization,
I'm talking about disciplining Irish Water.
You said in terms of the yes, and you made the comparison with ESB, and you said that electricity. You said that electricity, it doesn't leak to the same extent. Because people have to pay an electricity bill, and so the utility is held to account by its customers. Just a variation of that, you said, right?
There are two separate effects, but yes, effectively, go ahead.
Right, okay. Electricity doesn't leak the way water leaks, because if it did, it would kill people.
No, that's actually not true. Electricity does leak all the time, and ESB put a lot of resources into making sure it doesn't leak. I was the secretary. Of course, they put a lot of resources into making sure it doesn't leak, because if it did leak, it would kill people. I'm happy to have a podcast with you about electricity. I was the secretary of the ESB Group of Unions for 4 years. I think I know a little bit about it. I'm sure you do as well. Yes.
But you cannot compare water coming through a Victorian infrastructure in Dublin 6, but a newer infrastructure in Dublin 20, leaking about half the potable water it uses, to ESB, not having shorts. That's with any business.
Every business is careful, whether it's dangerous or not. Every business is careful not to waste its resources.
Well, yes, except the waste in Irish Water's case is through the leaks.
Yes.
And instead of putting the 1 billion euro that's been wasted into fixing leaks.
Yeah.
The argument is that you should put it into putting in meters, and that the meters then will get people to use less, and that that'll conserve. Well, I've just said it'll conserve 1.38% of the total, and then that you would use the bills that people pay in addition to the taxation.
No, I disagree with that model. I don't know. That may be what Irish Water intends.
It is, but it doesn't work.
Yes, no, and I agree. And to extend the metaphor, there isn't that much water in the barrel for them to save in terms of domestic discipline. I agree with that.
That's right.
But there is in terms of disciplining Irish Water, and the water systems were run terribly for decades by the local authorities because there was no financial discipline on them.
Right.
There's no financial discipline on them. It didn't matter.
No money.
Exactly the problem with a lot of things in Ireland. But the bottom line was, if they delivered dirty water to people in County Roscommon, nobody could exert financial discipline on them. If they leaked half their water, as they did, nobody could exert financial discipline on them. But if you say Irish Water has to survive on the basis and process to a high standard the water and sell it to their consumers, then there is a strong financial discipline on Irish Water, and you're disregarding the benefits of that.
No, I'm not disregarding it, William. You can have all the discipline on Irish Water or Roscommon County Council that you like. You can have all the discipline you like.
But we didn't, and that's why the system's a disaster.
Am I interviewing you or you?
Go right ahead.
Right, thank you. You can have all the discipline you like. If the local authority, or in Irish Water's, in Right to Water's view, the National Water Authority, which is what we want to see, doesn't have the required investment to fix the leaks, then all the discipline in the world isn't going. They're not going around with sledgehammers breaking the pipes, William. The pipes
are not fixing them.
They're not fixing them because they don't have the money. And they don't have the money because they're putting the money into the wrong things. They're putting the money into call centres, consultants, solicitors, bills.
That's a straw man.
What's a straw man?
I agreed with you at the very start. The terrible way in which Irish Water is run, it doesn't change the absolute fact that giving a product away for free means that not only is there no discipline on the consumer, there is no discipline on the supplier either.
True.
There's no discipline on them to supply a good product, and there's no discipline on them to not waste it.
There is an energy regulator. You use the comparison with ESB. It's actually the same regulator, right? There is an energy regulator. I do not accept that there is no discipline on Irish Water for wasting money, although the model is a joke. The regulator can impose discipline. The money was allowed for privatisation.
Here we have regulators and this on that. The only regulator that really works is the consumer. We had a regulator for Telecom Éireann. I don't think Apple have never had a regulator. I don't think that the telephones that Telecom Éireann produced were in the same league as what Apple is producing. The real regulator is the consumer.
That happened in different decades. No, okay, I'm just going to deal with that head on. The real regulator is the consumer. No, it isn't. I don't believe society should be structured in that way. You're putting an argument, whether you believe it or not, that it should. You're putting an argument that the market is the regulator. I don't believe in that. I just don't believe in that. I don't believe that everything, and I certainly don't believe that something as important as our human right to water should just be thrown out there and regulated in a laissez-faire manner by the market. I think that results in the absolute worst outcome for all consumers and the very worst outcome of all for the poorest and most needful consumers. I don't believe in structuring society like that. I believe in structuring society. We're talking about water here. I can extend it to health, education. I'd even extend it to electricity, William, if you want to talk about that some other time, right?
Okay.
I believe in a society that at the very least funds that which is essential for us all. We can all choose then whether we have an iPhone or not, right? But the things we all need as essential for life, I believe, should be controlled and should be owned publicly, should be managed efficiently.
Would you include food?
There should hold on a minute now. By the way, there is a subsistence level of social welfare so people don't starve.
Sure, yeah.
So yes.
And it will be possible to pay for a basic supply of water.
And we already have that. And whether I have baked beans and toast or a T-bone steak, right, is a choice. But we do provide for basic subsistence levels of food, William.
I want to move on to one thing in that case, Brandon. You've made that point very clearly. I want to move on to one thing. You said a couple of months ago that you intend to launch a new political party in September. September is not far away. I'm taking this will probably be a left-wing party?
I didn't say that.
What did you say?
You're a gas man, William. I wrote an article in the Sunday Business Post, first of all, last Christmas, pointing out that the decision of Sinn Féin to be open to coalition with the right-wing parties that have always ruled the state was a game changer. That it effectively meant that, there was going to be no, based on what exists at the moment, there was going to be no emergent, true alternative progressive party on, the centre left or the left or whatever you want to call it. And I called for a debate about that. It's an article I wrote in the Sunday Business Post at Christmas Eve, I think, last year. And in the following months, about 300 people have engaged and have been engaging in that debate. I believe, personally, and I believed then, and I believe now, that we should have a party which is rights-based, leading on from our discussion. We should have a party which, for example, ascribes the right to change, the 10 right to change policy principles. We should see a separation of church and state. And there is no party, I have no party to vote for in the next election, William. I don't have one. There's no party out there that appeals to me. And as someone that's acutely interested in Irish politics and in the state of our country, I find that distressing.
There's a quote from you here. There's a quote from you here in the Irish Times, in quotation marks, it says, "Everyone will follow the right to change policy platform. We are ruling out coalition with Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael and looking for a separation of church and state." That does sound like setting up a new party. No. The only thing I'm taking distinction with is I think such a new party should be set up. I'm not arguing with that. You're right about that. I thought it. I still think it. People are discussing it. The only minor issue I'm taking with you is this person here is not setting up a new party. So this person here believes there should be one. Is in an individual discussion with people about it, and if it happens, it will happen because
there is a block of people throughout the state who thinks it should happen under the three principles you've just read out: non-coalition, right to change principles, and separation of church and state. So yes, that discussion is going on. Yes, it's something that I personally, not professionally, personally am interested in. But I don't think it should be, laid at the door of one person. If it's about one person, be it me or anybody else, we've seen what happened with Renew and Lucinda Creighton, didn't we?
Yes.
If it's about one person, it won't work, and it shouldn't work.
We talked to Mr. Leahy, the current leader of the remains of Renua, a couple of podcasts ago.
I listened.
Brendan Ogle, you will have a standing invitation if and when you launch that party. You'll have a standing invitation.
When the party is launched with me as a member, William.
With you as a member, you'll have a standing invitation to come and set out your principles on this podcast. Brendan Ogle, founder of the Irish Locomotive Drivers Association, secretary of the ESB Group of Unions, Unite Senior Officer in the Republic of Ireland, coordinator of Right to Water, chief cook and bottle washer. Thank you very much for talking to me.
Enjoyed it, William. Thank you.
Here's How is Ireland's political, social and current affairs podcast. Make your view heard. Record a contribution to be included in the next show. Just dial 076 603 5060 and tell the world what you're thinking. Your voicemail may be included in the next podcast. You can find tips on recording your contribution and other ways to contact the show at here'show.ie/call.
Go to the website for sources and references for everything we were talking about. And while you're there, please like the show on Facebook, follow at Here's How Podcast on Twitter, follow Right to Water Ireland at Right to Water IRL, and get in touch with me if you can suggest a guest or topic for a future show. Also, you can find out how to subscribe to the podcast for free on your computer, on your phone, or by email. It's all at www.here'show.ie. And don't forget, there's a link to my Patreon account there too. So if you'd like to make a small donation to help the podcast be more frequent and have more research, I'd really appreciate that. The Here's How podcast is produced and presented by me, William Campbell. Thank you for listening.